You look around people, the amount of Christians, oh, you're a Christian nationalist. I'm like, of course I'm a Christian nationalist. Number one, I'm a nationalist because if you think you're oppressed right now, you haven't seen oppression.
Sure.
Like you haven't seen grow up in the Middle East. So at the moment in Australia, Christianity is being criminalized one day at a time. So now we have prayer. Types of prayer are illegal.
But you had a people group that identified as Christians, but did not love their neighbor well.
Ruslan.
So in terms of, you said you guys are about 10 years ahead in terms of what America, and what does that look like right now?
So
for Australia?
multiculturalism. So the opposite of multiculturalism is nationalism. Okay. So in Australia, we don't have a lot of Australian flags around. So you go around, well, we have de-Australianized the nation. The purpose of multiculturalism is to remove love for country. Like people are saying, oh, Trump is a nationalist. I'm like, of course, the nationalism is the best idea.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the funny thing about nationalism...
And I'm happy to argue that case as well.
Nationalism is interesting because I grew up Armenian, and Armenians are very nationalistic. Nationalism seems to be okay everywhere but in the West. Yeah. You know, if you grew up in a Armenian context, Armenian and Christian, you don't really even detangle those. Now, that's a separate conversation on if that's salvation and you're born again or not. But it's an interesting view that when you go to other places, everyone is nationalistic to a certain degree, and they have a degree of excitement for where they're at and where they're from.
Which you are supposed to. Like, this is the problem with people, because they're not biblically trained, and pastors have watered down the gospel. You look around people, the amount of Christians, oh, you're a Christian nationalist. I'm like, of course I'm a Christian nationalist. Number one, I'm a nationalist because I'm not a globalist. I don't believe in one world.
There should be borders. There should be nation states. There should be separation.
Jesus said, go into all the world and make disciples of all the nations. The Bible believes in nations. It's literally in the Great Commission. So you got three options: globalism, nationalism, anarchy. So as Christians, it's a very good biblical case we're nationalists. Globalism, that's a one world order, the mark of the beast, no matter how you want to go that direction. But we're not globalists. We're not after tyranny. Globalism is tyrannical. So if you're a Christian, we're all nationalists. Like there is no... Now the next question, do you want Christian nationalism or atheist nationalism or pagan nationalism? So of course, as a Christian, I want Christian nation. Christian men create Christian families create Christian communities create Christian cities, and Christian cities become Christian countries. So by nature, if you have Christian men, you will end up with a Christian nation. That's just the common sense. You save a man, you save a family, you save a family, you save a nation. So of course I am a Christian nationalist. So what multiculturalism is, it's an empathetic leftist way of introducing communism, because the communism hinges on destroying the past and demonizing it. So what they're doing is that they're destroying the past by bringing people with a different story. And before you know it, you don't have a nation. So I was born in the Middle East. I went to Australia to live like an Australian. I don't want to be an Egyptian Australian. If I left Egypt, I need to go to Australia to act like an Australian. If I come to America, I need to subscribe to the American values. I didn't come here to be Egyptian American. Not really. I don't care about that. So the problem we have at the moment is that multiculturalism, they're telling people, come here and bring your crap with you.
Yeah.
Well, leave it home.
What aspects of your ethnicity do you think are fair to bring? Because I think that's the tricky part you get into.
At this point of time, nothing, because Egypt is Islamized.
Yeah, I'm not talking about Egypt. I'm talking about in general. I'm talking as people are migrating, people are coming over.
If you're Italian, bring pizza, man. It'd be awesome. But like,
sure,
bring your food. Kebabs.
No. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's certain aspects that are of every culture where we have to reject certain things. Absolutely, certain aspects need to be rejected, right? So for me, I'll give you a context. Coming from Soviet culture, we have to reject the Soviet despair that then usually is connected with alcoholism. So there was a lot of folks that came over. They were alcoholics. I remember my mom getting calls. So-and-so's husband just killed himself in a drunk driving accident, right? So that is an aspect that we have to reject. Alcoholism, no matter how intertwined it is with Soviet culture and Armenians, we have to reject that. Then there's other parts where I feel like we can receive. You made the joke about, shish kebab, shashlik, right? All these things, We could receive the food. We could receive the customs. We could receive even some of the stereotypes. Armenians are notoriously for being late, right? It's like, it's fun.
That's like Egyptians. That's awesome.
Right. And then there's also an aspect where there's certain things I think we can redeem about our cultures, right?
I think Armenia will have a lot because you got the Christian nation.
Yeah.
We don't have anything in the Egyptian world. We don't, because we're gone. We're 90% Muslim, so we are institutionally heart, mind, and soul Islamized.
So you're saying even, that's incompatible in the West.
So it goes back. So for example, Armenia, you're looking probably 20 to 50% culture can be redeemed because you got Armenia still Orthodox. Italy, they're Catholic. There's an element of Christendom. Europe in general, people like, you're white supremacist. I'm like, yeah, Europe is Christian. I'm sorry, man. I'm like, the reality is white culture is mostly Christian. Whether people like it or not, Middle Eastern culture is Muslim. So you'll find that in the Middle Eastern culture, you want to probably reject 90% of it because we have been Islamized for a very, very, like the sad reality is that Christians in the Middle East can be Muslim in their values. So violence.
Christians in the Middle East can be Muslim in their values. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's the same as Christians here are woke in their values. Like culture and worldview, it's the air that you breathe. It's the water that you swim in. So if you're not intentional, you'll be marinated in it. So for example, there is lots of domestic violence among Christians in the Middle East because Muslims do it to the children and to the wives. It's very common in Christian community. And that is a moment where we're being mingling with the spirit of the age of Islam. You got Christians for Palestine. And, we're going to fight for Palestine. Again, that's mingling with the spirit of the age. You got a lot of people in Egypt that say Arabs and Muslims are the best. And I'm like, actually, your nation was Christian. You got colonized by Islam. So I think Middle Eastern culture, 90% of it, I would reject it. But it's case by case. Europe and your region, you got us still very Christianized. And you'll have the little bit of that ancient European drinking and Viking type of paganism.
I can't speak too much to Europe. I do think, like, here's an issue that people in America, and you might call this woke or whatever, but I think the issue here in America is that there was a Christian origin to some degree. You want to call America a Christian nation, not a Christian nation, inspired by Christian principles. It's really irrelevant to me. But you had a people group that identified as Christians, but did not love their neighbor well when it comes to black people. And that's a messy part of our history. So I think that the difficult part is when you just, I don't want to generalize and say, well, whites are generally Christian. It's like, okay, but there's these nasty aspects of our history, ours as in like, I'm an assimilated American, in the same way that we would say, wait a minute, no, that's Islam influencing Christians to behave in a way they ought not by beating their wives. We have to say the same thing in America where, hey man, from slavery to Jim Crow to everything that happened afterwards, there's a lot of subjugation of people of color in America, and it's been harmful. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't say like, oh yeah, well, it's just like, oh, the Europeans
I'm very
are
interested though in a lot of the statements because the reality is change is incremental.
Sure.
So for example, when you look at Europe, you see a lot of this ancient sexual liberation.
Sure.
That's part of paganism. They went from pagan to Christian and they carried it. So my question is with slavery, is that it was a very normal, natural part of the human existence. Whether you like it or not, it's wrong.
Yeah, not chattel slavery though. That was unique, right? And because kidnapping people was punishable by death in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Right, so that's a little different. If someone goes broke and they got to sell themselves to pay their debt back,
like Abraham,
that's very
Hagar
different.
And that
yeah, we're going to go partner with these opposing villages.
Well,
and sell
it was
people.
actually the Arab Muslims that kidnapped the black people from Africa and sold them to America. So technically, if you want to look at the ethics of the time, that was a trade.
Sure, yeah, no, I understand. And
I'm always challenging people because I'm like, dude, the fact that you have equality in the West, like coming from the Middle East, the Western America did very well.
I hear you. I'm just saying,
I'm coming down from the other side of the world.
No. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying we have to acknowledge that there's incongruence in every culture with your set values, with how you've actually walked out those values. And I think America is not without blemish, and I think the West is not without blemish. I'm not even talking about like colonization and islands and these groups and the Queen. I'm talking a very basic like. you give people rights, and then you have Jim Crow laws.
But
that's
I am
real
impressed.
recent here.
I am very impressed by how the Christian West, how far they became.
Sure.
It's mind blowing, and I'm simply saying that to people because I'm like to people. If you think you're oppressed right now, you haven't seen oppression.
Sure.
Like you haven't seen grow up in the Middle East racism. I'm like, if you're a Christian, on your ID, a Muslim had number 1. A Christian had number 2.
You actually had a sense of hierarchy.
Had a system.
Yeah, system.
When I go to court,
apartheid. That sounds like apartheid.
We had that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, when I come to racism, I'm like, dude, I don't see anything at this point of time.
Yeah.
I'm like, systematic racism. Cool, where?
Yeah.
Like we literally had a number. We literally, like, if you had a Christian last name, you go to court, you lost the case. You're gone. Like we just had.
You're talking about real deal things that you experienced.
So one thing you knew in Egypt, you as a Christian, you cannot go to court. Every time you go to church, when you park in front of church, everybody that parks in front of church will get a fine. So by the end of the year, we pay the fine. Every time my dad will go, and the fine will be $50,000.
Whoa!
Wow. What we'll have to do, we'll have to literally bribe the guy to get rid of the fine. You want to talk about ethical gymnastics?
Sure.
You know,
as a pastor.
Well, so we grew up in that world that is like, what the heck, man? Like so, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I come here,
no, this
I'm
makes
like,
sense. This
and I'm
makes
like
sense.
to people, dude, like when I came here and people were like, have you experienced racism?
Yeah.
I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I'm like, not really.
So from your paradigm,
from my perspective,
from your perspective, this would make sense why you have been infamous in certain instances for some of your statements, because when you see liberal Christianity and the disservice it does to the truth, it bugs you, and it should.
So the culture in Australia is leftism, institutional liberalism and leftism. I said to you before that our right is your left wing. So it's like our paradigm. I said before, if Kamala Harris won, America was transitioning from capitalism to socialism. At the moment, Australia, we are transitioning from socialism to communism.
Full-on communism.
Like removing content, putting pastors in jail. In Australia right now, if I pray for a gay person in the church, I can go to jail for 3 to 5 years.
Just to pray for a gay person?
Just pray for a gay person.
Not even to try and tell them to stop being gay?
Yeah. This conversation can get me to court and jail if you're gay.
Whoa.
You can right now, me talking to you, you can report that I offended you and I'm trying to change you.
Wow.
So at the moment in Australia, we're moving to what I call gay communism.
Okay.
And it sounds,
unpack that for me.
So
gay communism.
So because communism didn't work in the West, the poor and the rich, the communists went back to the drawing board and they derived it into 3 sections. Gay, straight, LGBTQ versus straight. So you will see all this flag. The gay flag is a communist flag. It's a flag that's designed to split people into 2 groups of people. And the LGBTQ, it's a sex religion. That's real. I always say to people, the LGBTQ is a sex religion that pretends to be a human rights campaign. It's a sex religion. God created us to worship him, love people, and use sex. What the LGBTQ sex cult wants us to do, it wants us to love self, use people, and worship sex. So that's kind of...
So it's an inversion.
It's an inversion. So God created us to love people, worship him, use sex. What the LGBTQ sex cult claim, love is love, is that we need to worship sex, love self, and use people. And that flag is a propaganda flag that's designed to indoctrinate children, number 1. But number 2, is designed to become a political campaign to bring people to vote left. So in Australia, we're seeing the persecution of Christians and Christianity under the disguise of LGBTQ rights.
Right.
So communism is a forceful removal of God out of the public square. And the LGBTQ sex cult in Australia are using the LGBTQ ideology from genderqueer, gender bender, all that kind of frogman, frogwoman, all that weird stuff. They're using it as an excuse to criminalize Christianity. So at the moment in Australia, Christianity is being criminalized one day at a time. So now we have prayer. Types of prayer are illegal. Like this sounds like some Babylonian stuff. Pastoral care for gay people is illegal. Conversations with gay people is illegal. The only thing I'm allowed to do at this point of time with this stuff is to talk from platform, preach, and that will not be there for for too long. Not just that, with now at the moment in Australia, we're facing a bigger problem where they're forcing Christian schools to teach us things. The LGBTQ sex cult,
they're forcing Christian schools to do this. They're forcing Christian schools to teach what LGBTQ civics studies, history.
Yeah. So if we don't teach it, the school will lose their license.
Whoa.
We're now arguing that debate. So we're now, in the next 5 years, Christian schooling will become illegal in Australia.
That's crazy.
So we have to homeschool. And guess what comes after Christian schooling? They're going to make homeschooling illegal. So my kid have to listen to the sex cult of the LGBTQ, and my Christian school have to teach it. The only organization that is now not going to be, it's going to be allowed to not participate in that is church. For how long? I'm not sure.
So you would think
so that's what I mean to you. It's gay communism.
Okay,
just Google LGBTQ sex cult. You'll find a communist fist. It's not really. It's not really. It's not a. It's called critical queer theory, which is the gay section of the communist theory. So people think I'm being hateful, but I'm like, it's a political ideology. I'm not I'm not even making up stuff, man. Like they literally have a flag.
Anyone that's familiar with critical theory understands gender theory and all that sort of stuff. So tell me about you said
that's how I see it. I'm like, you don't like me. I'm like, it's okay. You said not everybody can like me.
You said Australia has open borders.
Well,
so because I'm trying to figure that out.
We don't, but we do. So it's like we had 1.2 million refugees in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So we have, because we're an island, you can't just come in.
Right. That's what I'm confused about.
Well, it's technically from a policy POV. 1.2 million. The nation is like 28 million people. So theoretically, it's fundamentally changing 3 to 4%. So if you keep on doing this, after 2 election cycles, every few years we look in Australia. It's not the same it was. So we had to move areas last year because my area in Sydney Southwest became so Muslim, I was getting death threats.
And most of these people are coming from Muslim countries.
Yeah.
Wow.
So what happened to me in Egypt does not happen to me to Australia.
That's crazy.
So now I have to watch for my wife. I have to watch for our church for security. So I escaped Islam in the Middle East to come here, and they doing the exact same thing.
Wow.
They did in the Middle East. So people like me and Bishop Murray, we escaped the Middle East to preach the gospel. We come here to find liberal white girls saying Islam, the religion of peace, and I'm Islamophobic. I'm like, they wanted to kill my family and me. It's very logical for a Christian to be fearful of Islam. It's very logical for you to be fearful of Islam. It's very logical for their religion that is at enemy with everybody. Like people like, oh, genocide, Israel committing genocide. I'm like, dude, Islam at the moment is waging war in Israel, with Israel versus Palestine. Islam at the moment is waging war in Sudan. North Sudan is Muslim, South Sudan is Christian. Islam at the moment is waging war in Nigeria. North Nigeria is Christian, South Nigeria is Muslim. Islam at the moment is waging war between the Hindus. You got Bangladesh versus India. Islam at the moment, there is a lot of tension and drama in UK between the white Christians and between the Muslims. So Islam is waging war at the moment on every single front. If you really look what's happening, your region, Georgia, Turkey, Armenia, I don't even know what's happening there. What I do know is the media doesn't report on anything happening there. So to come from the Middle East to the West, and then I'm an Islamophobe, we literally had the terrorist police come to our church to check on me for potential hate incident.
Like against you or you?
Against Islam.
Oh, wow.
So I am the one committing hate. So I told them, hey, dude, I came here as a refugee because Muslims wanted to kill me. And you're telling me I'm the terrorist? I'm like, guess what? Yeah. According to liberal leftism, everything is inverted. It's literally hinges on the removal of God. So right is wrong, wrong is right, left is right, right is left. What is woman? Well, trans woman are woman. Like so these systems of operation in the liberal Australia, which is ahead of you guys, we're watching the perpetrator become the victim and the victim become the perpetrator.
Oof.
Well, you're seeing it with trans women are women. If trans women are women, take that principle, every single thing you're going to imagine is going to be reversed. Watch you who call evil good and good evil. Watch as justice becomes injustice and injustice becomes justice. So it's very interesting coming here and watching the sweet alliance between the left and Islam. Hashtag quiz for Palestine.
Hey, if you want to see the extended version of this podcast, completely unedited, consider partnering with us in our online community for as little as $5 a month. In exchange, you get access to these podcasts as we stream them live before anyone else gets to see them. You get access to the replay of our daily after party streams, access to our private Discord server, access to discount codes, and so much more. So help us continue contextualizing the gospel through media, podcasting, and YouTube, and partner with us for as little as $5 a month. Also, be sure to follow us on the Spotify podcast app, on Facebook, and on Instagram. We're constantly posting content there that I think you'll find extremely valuable. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.